Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Ormond Beach, a welcoming community of compassion and acceptance. I am Denise Carter, and I invite you to our virtual service this morning. The in-person discussion group and worship services usually held in our building have been suspended until further notice. We will continue to hold discussion group at 9:15 a.m. and worship at 10:30 a.m. every Sunday via Zoom until it is safe to hold large group functions again in our building. If you are joining us for the first time this morning, we extend a special welcome to you. We invite you to stay on the Zoom meeting after the service concludes, when many in attendance enjoy a bit of conversation with each other. We would invite you to see our website at uuormond.org and look for the Introduce Yourself, the welcome button under the picture of our minister, Reverend Kathy. There you will find how to get further connected with our congregation and learn more about Unitarian Universalism. Now on to our announcements for the good of our community. Our virtual Christmas Eve service will be at 5 p.m. The link will be posted soon. If you have anything in the way of entertainment you would like to offer, please contact Ludi Goodson as soon as possible. Please share your holiday memories. For the worship service on December the 20th, Reverend Kathy is calling for your best, warmest, and meaningful memories of your past winter holidays. These memories could be related to Christmas or Hanukkah or other winter celebrations, pastime, or adventure. Please try to put them in the form of a sentence or short phrase. Reverend Kathy will be putting your memories in the form of a litany, a recitation of holiday cheer. Reverend Kathy would greatly appreciate it if you would share your memories via email as soon as possible, but by December the 16th at the latest. This coming Wednesday at 4 p.m., Lifelong Learning will present Dan Kennedy on the subject of Carl Jung. The Zoom link is on the website and in this week's e-news. The viewing of the movie Smoke Signals is rescheduled for Wednesday, December the 16th at 4 p.m. Please see this week's e-news for more information. Our building remains closed to most activities while the final stages of the renovation are underway. If you must be in the building, a mask is required. Please practice social distancing. A hand sanitizer dispenser is located in the kitchen. Please remember to schedule all events through our administrator, Kathy Jackson. While we are not holding congregational activities in the building, we still need to coordinate Zoom meetings and events and have them on the church calendar. In the absence of a physical passing of the offering basket at this time, we invite you to make any smaller donations in honor of our virtual worship services or in financial support of the congregation through our PayPal donation button on our website. For larger donations or pledge payments, checks sent to UUCOB are appreciated.
From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live.
At the sound of the chime, our service begins.
Good morning. Our call to worship this morning, the heart of our faith by Monica Jacobson Tennyson. What is it that calls you here, that calls you onward, that calls you inward, that leads you homeward? What is it that gives you the power to make that change, to ask that question, to take that journey? What is it that says you have done well, that asks you to learn more, that brings you to stillness, that holds you up in hard times? It is relationship, the beating heart of our faith. It begins when we share this hour, our truths, this air, our hearts. Come, let us worship together.
I invite you to light a chalice at home if you have one nearby. I light this chalice, a single flame, which I hope kindles many hearts this morning. Let this flame unite us in virtual community and remind us of each other's presence as we worship from many singular rooms. Let this flame inspire us in faith and courage to face these difficult times. Let this flame be our guide in making sense of a chaotic world, and let its light show us the way to beloved community near and far. Next is our congregational covenant. Love is the spirit of this congregation, and service is our aim, to dwell together in peace and freedom, to seek the truth, and to help one another. These are our goals.
Thank you, Denise. Our joys and concerns this morning, Madison Webb, who was ill from complications of a snake bite several weeks ago, has turned a corner and is now recovering quite well. Once again, Teresa Webb extends her gratitude for your outpouring of care through cards, gifts, and messages. Let us continue to hold Madison in our hearts as she continues to heal. Denise Carter has a joy and a sorrow. First, Denise shares that her joy is she's going to be a grandmother. Her daughter, Natalie Palesko, is expecting a baby girl on May 13th. Congratulations, Denise. Denise also wishes to express a sadness at selling her Illinois family home of 57 years. Denise's mother died last year, and while selling the house was necessary, it was nonetheless hard for Denise to let go of her childhood home in which so many memories were made. Joy and woe are woven fine. Let us hold Denise in our hearts and as she holds both joy and sorrow. And finally, please keep Nancy Boyette in your heart in prayers as she recovers from a fractured wrist after a fall. For information about Nancy's needs at the moment, please contact Joyce Nelson, Chair of the Care Committee. And now for all the joys and concerns which remain silently on our hearts this morning, will you please pray with me? Spirit of life and love, bless us this day with the understanding that joy and woe are woven fine, that whosoever brings us tears also brings us great joy, that the hours before dawn are often the darkest. Spirit of life and love, bestow upon us the peace which passes our understanding, so that hope, faith, and love may fill our hearts and still our worrying minds. Spirit of life and love, in this difficult time, bid us to strive for our best selves each day. Let our striving be for justice, equity, and compassion in our human relations, and inspire us to create beloved community in ever-widening spheres. Spirit of life and love, we give thanks for this precious day and for all that is our life, for we know that our life is a gift, freely given, unbidden, and unearned. We give joyous praise for this, our one precious life. Amen. And now, Spirit of Life, performed by Janet Strumpus and recorded by Felix Fernandez. Well, good morning, and before I start with the reading, I will remind everyone once again, if you will please mute yourselves. I am once again Zooming from the sanctuary. I love being here and before you on my flat, bare feet in the sanctuary. And I can't wait for a time when we are all back together here again. Our reading this morning is an excerpt from an essay from the website School of Life. Our lives might be a lot more balanced if we learn to reallocate prestige, pulling it away from those with a full calendar and towards those wise enough to allow for some afternoons of reflection. We should think that there is courage not just in traveling the world, but also in daring to sit home with one's thoughts for a while, risking encounters with uncertainty or with certain anxiety-inducing or melancholy, but also highly necessary ideas. Without the shield of busyness, we might bump into the realization that our relationship has reached an impasse, that our work no longer answers to any higher purpose, or that we feel furious with a family member who is subtly exploiting our patience. The heroically hard worker isn't necessarily the one in the business lounge of the international airport. It might be the person gazing without expression out the window and occasionally writing down one or two ideas on a pad of paper. The point of doing nothing is to clean up our inner lives. Have you ever heard the voice still and small that comes softly yet clearly to your awareness? The voice is distinct from the thoughts that continually stream through your consciousness in every waking moment. Rather than words, it might be an image or an impression that arises from nowhere, but that points you in the right direction or gives you an unshakable truth you didn't know you needed. Still hearing somebody who's unmuted. Rebecca, can you help us out here? I'm not talking about the voice of reason. I'm not referring to the light bulb that goes off in your head producing a good idea, nor am I suggesting intuition, a sort of precognitive hunch or feeling. When I say still small voice, I refer to what John O'Donohue describes as the lone discerning voice, tempered with the tungsten edge of truth. It is the lone voice that springs from deep within, a voice our minds and egos would sooner ignore, but which can't be denied when we quiet ourselves enough to receive the truth of it. The idea of the still small voice is reflected in the Old Testament. In 1 Kings, the story tells of Elijah, the prophet, who has drawn the ire of King Ahab's wife, Jezebel. Elijah, attempting to escape certain death by her command, traverses the wilderness from Israel back to a cave near Mount Sinai, the site where Moses received the 10 Commandments. Hiding out in this cave, Elijah is told by an angel that he's about to be visited by God. Immediately, Elijah hears the roaring sound of a terrible windstorm, then the rumble of an earthquake, and after that feels the heat of a firestorm. But out of all that tumult, Elijah does not hear the voice of God. Elijah stays in the cave, trembling in fear and covering his face with his cloak. But then everything goes quiet. He hears nothing but absolute silence. Elijah moves cautiously to the entrance of the cave, and it is only then that Elijah receives instructions from God. Elijah knows now he is safe, and with certainty he knows what he needs to do. Now, it is in the King James Version of the Bible that describes the silence and the voice of God as the still small voice. Other translations use gentle little breeze or the sound of a light whisper. In any case, scholars think that the narrator of this story is purposefully contrasting God's voice as in the silence, rather than the traditional thunderous and frightening voice of the God of Sinai. The voice of God now emerges from silence, not a tumultuous whirlwind. Reverend Angela Herrera speaks of the hecticness of our lives and how we can lose our balance and a little of our sanity when we are overtasked and overwhelmed. And when we start to feel like staying in bed and pulling the covers up over our heads, it's the right time, she says, to stop, breathe, and listen for the silence. Herrera says, as with Elijah, the holy waits for us too, if we are in a listening posture. The still small voice might say, you tumble like a leaf, and yet by some miracle you are still here. Now what? I have experienced that still small voice, the unmistakable lone voice of truth, a few times in my life. The first time was when I found myself at a fairly young age in a very unhealthy relationship. And even though the risks of ending that relationship were great and the desire to stay in it were strong, the voice was clear. You are not safe. I knew what I had to do. The second time I actually experienced total silence was when I was left inadvertently alone on the delivery room table, postpartum, in the deafening silence following 72 hours of the fear, pain, and chaos of a premature birth. I wanted nothing more in that moment than to express my gratitude for my newborn baby's life. But the empty silence itself spoke volumes. I had no spiritual life. I had no practice, no beliefs, no connection of any kind to that which was greater than the sum of my life at that point. I had no meaningful way in which to express my deep felt gratitude for my newborn's life. And recognizing the void pointed to the truth of my authentic need for a spiritual life and perhaps a religion too, even if I was not at all sure about the existence of God at the time. Still not sure. Eventually, I would find Unitarian Universalism. And a third time, I was in the early stages of preparing for Unitarian Universalist ministry. I happened to be at the Mountain, the Unitarian Universalist retreat in Georgia. I was on a choir retreat, which should have been relaxing and restorative. But I came to the Mountain feeling quite overwhelmed and overtaxed, near tears, and thinking, I do not have the chops for the path that lay ahead of me. I walked out onto the deck of the lodge that overlooks the surrounding mountains, at that time shrouded in a January mist. I sat down and started to meditate, and as soon as I quieted my mind, the words came to me, gentle and clear as a bell. What you need will come. The truth of those words sustained me many times in the years since. Times I look back upon with amazement at their fullness and challenge. I could not have seen it through without the truth of those words. What you need will come. John O'Donohue says, somewhere in every heart there is a discerning voice. We humans are at once complex and ambivalent. Our experiences are filtered through many layers of our being, and thus subject to many readings and interpretations. Therefore, our search for truth can be tricky and uncomfortable. And the mysteries of life are often too much for us to contemplate. Therefore, we tend to live on the surface of things. Our comfort becomes more important than the deeper truths. That's why we need to listen occasionally for that discerning voice that O'Donohue describes. The lone discerning voice is not the voice of custom, culture, or complicity. It is a voice that speaks not to the status quo, but to the truth of things. O'Donohue describes this voice as an inner whisper, not obvious or known to others outside. It receives little attention. Yet so much depends on that small voice. Its truth marks the line between honor and egoism, kindness, and chaos. When all else in our lives is stripped away in the face of vulnerability and risk, the still small voice whispers its truths to us so that even in the most desperate of situations, we can still connect with beauty and love in our lives. Our deepest truths hold out for us courage and dignity. In the face of pain and suffering, this voice echoes the beauty of our human being. This voice, O'Donohue says, brings us directly in contact with the unalienable presence of beauty in the soul. A word of caution. Don't confuse the still small voice, the inner voice that points to the beauty of your being. Don't confuse that voice with the voice of truth, with the inner voice of self-criticism and justice and judgment. Don't take the inner voice of self-criticism and judgment, as that still small voice. Like a harsh and unrelenting parent, such an inner voice finds fault with everything and can eclipse the affirmation of others. This inner critic can bring torment to the heart and become, as O'Donohue puts it, your primary internal choreographer, taking control of how you see yourself and the world. An inner critic can destroy our internal sense of beauty, and as I said last week, such false judgment, or the week before last, such false judgment can harden our hearts and rob us of our capacity for compassion and kindness. The still small voice within speaks truth, not injury. Now, from where does this still small voice, the discerning voice, come from? I firmly believe it does not come from outside us, but from within. But is it the voice of God within? Well, in the Judeo-Christian tradition, it is believed to be the voice of God. But for others, the still small voice within dwells in our heart of hearts, within the deepest well of our most authentic selves. This is my best sense of what that lone, discerning voice is for me. Many of us don't live as authentically as we could or can, or maybe even should. Because so much of our being is learned in the form of custom and culture and age and stage and where we are from and who our families are. And we have to operate within our egoic selves in order to survive in this world. But all of those things tend to put layers on top of that core of your being, your authentic self. Some refer to it as the font of who you are. Yet other spiritual leaders like Parker Palmer believe the still small voice is that of the soul, which he says is shy and keeps itself hidden from the noise and judgment of the world. Many of you who are in Soul Matters groups understand Palmer's concept of the shy soul and its voice. What is your sense of that still small voice, and what, if anything, does it mean to you? Many of us here today are in the latter halves of our lives anyway, some in the sunset of our lives. And I wonder, as we get older, are there deeper truths for us yet to discern? We have a wealth of experience about us. We know ourselves well. Others seek our wisdom and advice at times. Have we arrived at a point in our lives where our depths have been plumbed and the truth of ourselves fully discerned? Chances are that despite having lived long, fruitful lives, there are deeper truths yet to be revealed, for we don't often stop to listen for that still, small, and discerning voice within us. This is partly because plumbing our depths takes courage. As I said before, it's not always comfortable. It's not easy to understand the meaning of our lives when we live in what Parker Palmer calls the blizzard of our consumerist culture. We are, in fact, carefully groomed to live on the surface because there we are more likely to seek fulfillment through consumption. And there's no time when this is more obvious than December or Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. Our fourth principle calls us to a search for truth and meaning. This is what I call our keystone principle. For Unitarian Universalists, the ultimate end of a religious life is to discern as much of that truth and meaning in our lives as we can, and to help others find theirs. This is no easy task. It requires courage because the truth of our lives is sometimes hard to accept. It requires the will to slow down and value the contemplative life over a productive life. The search for truth and meaning is countercultural, and it requires quiet in order to hear that still small voice within. Now, I understand that not everyone here has experienced the still small voice as I describe it, or indeed embraces the idea. But as reflected in discussion group this morning, and by the way, I'm always amazed at how there's almost always some kind of a crossover between the chosen subject and what I wind up preaching on. But in discussion group this morning, most acknowledge the need for a purpose in life, or to find a purpose in life, and to seek meaning in our lives. Our fourth principle calls us to make room for contemplation and seek what lies in silence and stillness. May stillness be ours in the month of December. May your stillness be fruitful and revealing. May it be so. Our anthem this morning, the gift of music of Dan Gribben, Our Wild Florida.
I passed a quiet hour with an ibis yesterday. An ibis keeps quite busy, doesn't have too much to say. I wished I'd had my grandson there, he lives up north, you see. Every year at Christmas he comes down to visit me. But I want him to know ibis. I want him to know for the folks who own the land to sell out to developers to profit while they can. But I wonder how they'll square it with a grandchild who might ask where all the birds have gone the day they bulldoze the last path. I would want them to know ibis. I would want them to know osprey. Oh, I'd want them to know how much our wild Florida deserves to last. There's a spirit in the swampland at dawn when I arise, a white mist disappearing as the great blue heron flies. Anyone who knows the red-tailed hawk, I'm pretty sure will gain this reverence for old Florida that's coursing through my veins. There's more to learn from kingfishers than most folks find in books. I spotted one the other day, and here's the vow I took: to bring my grandson down all summer while the reeds are tall and green, to teach him nature's secrets, to hone his senses keen. For I want him to know ibis, and I want him to know osprey, and I want him to know how much my wild Florida is wild Florida. Our wild Florida can come to mean.
Thank you so much to Dan, who knows a thing or two about sitting still and finding meaning in our wild Florida.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Benediction, Anchors of Calm by the Reverend Scott Taylor. When the winds of your daring days begin to swirl, may you find your breath. May you remember that still point inside that is always waiting to welcome you back home. And from that place of sacred peace, may you be an anchor of calm for those who need it as much as you. Go in peace. Go in love, friends. Our postlude Still by Ola Kajelo, performed by Janet Strumpus and recorded by Felix Fernandez. That concludes our service, folks. If you would like to stay and enjoy some fellowship time together, please do so.